Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Borders and Beyond. I am your host, Martin. Today is January 25th, one day before Australia Day, or if you're an Indian, one day before the Republic Day. So, happy Republic Day to Indians and happy Australia Day to any Indians and or Australians. And while the world is focused on traditional borders, a new and invincible front has opened in the deep oceans, right? Today we're talking about a weapon that was satirized and was considered a piece of Cold War satire, but is now an official part of the Russian Navy arsenal. I'm talking about Project 09852, famously known as the Poseidon. What is it? What is the Poseidon? Well, to understand where we are and how we got here, we'll go back to 1950. Right, the physicist Leo Szilard theorized a cobalt bomb, right, a weapon that's designed not to just destroy a city, but to end human life. And I'll tell you a little bit about why it's more about ending human life. Now, this theory was satirized into a movie by Stanley Kubrick in a movie in 1964 called Dr. Strangelove, as a doomsday machine that would shroud the earth in radiation for 93 years, I think, something to that effect. Fast forward to 2015, and there was a leak, or was it a leak, on Russian television for a schematic for Status 6. Now, at that time, everybody thought it was, just Russian propaganda, or Russia just trying to play the game, right? However, at that time, even though people thought it was a bluff. Nobody thought that Russia had the capability of miniaturizing a nuclear engine. Here we are in September, I think, if I'm not mistaken, in September 2025, or August or September 2025, the Russian Navy moved to operational testing of the Poseidon, transforming this fictional nightmare into an actually strategic asset. And now when I say a strategic asset, now everyone knows about the triad, land, sea, and air, But now what Russia has done is basically have something called the Quad, basically really deep sea asset also, right? Something that nobody else has. So it's an extra dimension, right? So let's talk about the tech. Well, this particular product, or this particular machine, or this particular torpedo, if you want to look at it, it's actually a torpedo, is called the Canyon by NATO. And the specs are frankly out of this world, really out of this world. It is roughly 20 to 24 meters long, basically the size, I think twice the size of the length of a bus. It has a nuclear reactor, right? So that basically means unlimited range, theoretically unlimited range. It can actually sit at the bottom of the sea, just sit down there, and then when it's powered up, it can start moving, and it can move at 1,000 meters, so it easily moves in the 1,000-meter depths, and moves at speeds of 70 knots, which is approximately what I would say about 130 kilometers an hour. Now, in water, 130 kilometers is a lot of speed, unlimited range, and we're talking 1,000 meters underwater, right, or kilometer underwater. So basically the goal here it's to avoid any form of detection by the United States ABM, right, anti-ballistic missile defense systems, right? So rather than going through the atmosphere, it's going deep down. So radars and all the detection things that the Americans have, nothing is going to work, right? It avoids satellite detection, everything, the radars, everything, the whole lot. But here is where it gets really, really dark. Okay, the Poseidon is designed for what analysts call environmental sterilization, right? It is speculated to carry a salted warhead, cobalt-60 salted warhead. Okay, here's the physics, all right? It uses a stable isotope, which is cobalt-59, right? And then high-energy neutrons on detonation, high-energy neutrons get into it, and then all of a sudden you have a transmutation to cobalt-60. But and this is where it gets terrifying, right? This is really where it gets really terrifying. Look, and standard nuclear fallout, you start to see the decay happening within 4 weeks. With cobalt 60, we're talking half-life of over 5 years. All right, that is the major difference. So rather than a couple of weeks, we're looking at 5 years. So what does that really mean? So you all these preppers that have gone and built underground bunkers, it's not going to make a difference. You've got to come out sometime, and that's when it gets really, really dicey. And that's why they say it's called sterilization, right? It remains intensely lethal long enough to outlast people in bunkers, all right? Even after 50 years, dose rates can remain as high as 10 millisieverts per hour. Now, let me just give you a bit of context for this. So it's a bit of a theoretical thing. So I'm going to give you a bit of context so you can understand it. So 10 millisieverts per hour is very high. It's an extremely dangerous rate. So to give you a better perspective, the background radiation, typical background radiation is about, let's just say, microsieverts, 0.1 to 0.2 microsieverts, which is 1,000 times lower than 10 millisieverts, right? A full body CT scan is roughly about 10 to 30 millisieverts total, not per hour, right? So that is what I'm talking about. It's a no joke amount of radiation you're going to be coping, right? So yeah, so that makes it really a very lethal weapon, extremely lethal weapon, right? I mean, and the fact that the half-life is more than 5 years, it makes it really, really terrifying, extremely terrifying. Well, what is it not? Well, everyone talked about, when the Poseidon came out, everyone was like, oh, its ability to create tsunamis. Physicists are saying that's not possible. All right, it's. I think that's more of a myth. That's more about a marketing aspect of it, or not exactly marketing. That's people creating the fear aspect of it. I don't think you're going to have that radioactive tsunami, because the reason why they think it's not going to happen is simply because the radiation dissipates in a spherical format. It's not linear. Because if it's linear, is when you get those terrifying tsunamis. But because it's going in a spherical format, the odds on are that you're not going to get that tsunami effect. I don't think that's even going to be possible. However, in reality, it's pretty bad. Let's not get it. The underwater detonation carries radioactive, surge. So obviously the water is going to be contaminated. The lethal mist is going to be contaminated. So it's cobalt 60 that blankens the coast. So yeah, it's basically you can't grow anything. Everything is radioactive. So it just makes it literally impossible to do anything. Right? So it basically just kills off humanity. As simple as that. No ifs, no buts. It's bad enough, right? Let us put it this way. The Russians, not the Soviet. The Russians have the largest quantity of nuclear weapons, followed by the United States. I've said this before in another episode. All right. And apparently, it only takes a couple of nuclear weapons. So we're talking megatons here now. We're not talking the kilotons which they used in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Things have now gone into megatons, right? It only takes a couple of them to completely end life here. And we're talking that Russia has couple of thousands, and so does America. So what the rest of the world has doesn't really matter. So if you're a prepper and you're down under the ground and you've prepped it all your life, you might be able to survive it, okay? Because after 5 years it might be difficult, but you might be able to survive it. But with this salted cobalt 60 weapon, the Poseidon, you're not going to survive. It doesn't matter. You've got to come out at some time. You're not going to be deep underground for the next 50 years because then you would be something else, right? So basically, it's the end of life. And look, more than likely, it will be the end of life by the time they fire off a couple of thousand of these things. None of us will be existing, so it matters. Well, it's all theoretical here, right? But the fact that the Russians have a weapon that cannot be detected by what all the detection methods that the United States have, both satellites and radars and things underwater and sonar and everything else. You can't detect this shit, right? So it just makes it really, really terrifying. And the fact that it's got a miniaturized nuclear power plant in it makes it unlimited range, right? There's no limit to this range, and the fact that it's also really fast makes it even more difficult. Even if you see it, it's hard to track it. It's 130 kilometers an hour, 70 knots, right? So that's basically what makes it really, really. So how is Russia going to deploy this? Well, Russia recently brought out a new submarine called the Belgorod, or the K329, right? And they're also bringing out a new submarine called Khabrovsk, right? Which is started to see sea trials. You start to see sea trials in 2026. Both these two submarines have the capability of carrying the Poseidon, 6 canisters each. 6 canisters each. Just think about it, right? That's what's and each of these Poseidon things carry 100 megaton warhead. So, and just think about it. Now let me tell you the warhead size. It's 100 megaton, right? We're not talking small numbers here. We're talking huge numbers, right? So each of these submarines carries 6 canisters, the ability to fire 6 of these things, right? It's the end of the world, right? It effectively creates a nuclear quad. The rest of the world has triads. The Americans have triads, the Brits have triads, the French have triads, the Chinese have triads. Everyone has got triads. Indians have got triads, right? Sea, land, sea, and air. It's the 4th dimension. Deep sea. So there's nothing to stop it. And there's nothing to detect it either. So that's it. In a nutshell. Right? Yeah, so what does it actually mean, and why did the Russians put it out? Well, look, there was a START treaty that kind of made sure that everyone played within the rules and you don't go creating things that are more problematic. And we're talking about nuclear weapons, right? Well, all that has come to an end, and as a result, everyone is now just going ahead and creating newer and newer deadlier weapons. Until we get a new START treaty, we are going to be, everything is going to be just, the moment the Russians have done it, the Americans are going to do it. Before you know it, the Chinese will be doing it. Everybody's going to be doing it, right? And then somebody has to kick it up further up again. So we are looking at an unregulated phase in our lives where everyone is going to be kicking it up as far as they can, right? Because nobody wants to be left behind. And because if you're going to be left behind, then that's it. If you know what I mean, right? So in this regard, that's where this gets, and I think it's time for all of us, for some sanity to come into game to this, where hopefully saner minds come in and say, listen guys, we need to have some regulations here. Everyone plays within these regulations so everyone knows what's going on. If not, what ends up happening is if someone mistakes that we are under threat, you're going to run into problems, right? If one of these countries like Russia or the United States feel that they're under threat, they will open up. There's no ifs or buts about it. There are multiple times during the Cold War that we were nearly at the where they nearly opened it up on DEFCON 4, right? So nearly went there. So this is a situation where It's very, very dangerous. And, you know, so for the Russians, they have now 4 dimensions. So if you, say, for example, knock out their silos, they have mobiles, missiles, right? If you knock out all the airfields and you shoot down all their planes, they have submarines, right? If you manage to detect all their submarines and everything, they have Poseidon. And the Russians have something called the dead man's hand. So, and remember, the Russians have a command system called the dead man's hand. So you take out the entire Russian leadership, the dead man's hand comes into play, and there will be nuclear war. Right? So it's fun, isn't it? I mean, talking about all this. So here it is. The West is basically pivoting towards more like seabed warfare. They're using things like the P-8A Poseidon, ironically named. India's got a couple of these, and they're very, very good. And these are converted 737s, Boeing 737s, and they're very, very good. But here's the thing: because the doomsday machine can't be detected and can stay dormant, and you can fire it up at any given time and moves at that 140 kilometers an hour at a depth of 1,000 meters. It makes it practically hard. In fact, let's put it this way: traditional sonar cannot detect it. Let's just put it that way, because traditional sonar cannot reach 1,000 meters. It can't be detected, right? So to give every planner in NATO something to think about and say, I don't want that, right? But it's only a matter of time before the Americans come out with something new also. So here we are. We're back to the Cold War times, where everybody's just jumping in and doing things, and all of a sudden we have all these really, really, really lethal weapons that are coming on board. More and more people are using lethal weapons. So it's making it terrifying. It's extremely terrifying. And it only takes a small misunderstanding for things to go completely south. Well, on that absolute bombshell, I hope you enjoyed this little episode. I just thought I'll talk about the Poseidon very quickly. Bring it to a close. Thank you very much, and see you next time.